It began with blood on the yard. Not a riot, not yet. Just a single act of revenge that would mark the birth of one of America's most dangerous prison gangs, the Aryan Brotherhood. It was 1967. San Quentin was already one of the toughest prisons in the country, overcrowded, divided, and violent. Inside its walls, race dictated everything. Black inmates moved together. Hispanic inmates had their own groups. And white inmates, smaller in number, were often caught in the middle, unprotected. That morning, a fight broke out between two inmates in the yard, one white, one black. It should have ended like every other prison fight, quick, brutal, forgotten. But by the time the guards reached them, one man was dead. The killer, a white inmate named Barry Mills, stood over the body, breathing heavily, his hands slick with blood. The others in the yard watched. No one spoke. And in that silence, something began to shift. Inside segregation, Mills made a promise to the few white inmates locked nearby. "They protect each other," he said quietly. "So will we." Those 5 words, whispered through cell bars, would grow into one of the most feared and secretive criminal brotherhoods in U.S. prison history. At first, it wasn't about hate. It was about survival. White inmates were outnumbered in California prisons in the late 1960s. The black guerrilla family had power. So did the Mexican mafia. Both controlled parts of the yard, the drugs, and even the guards. The white inmates? They had no organization, no protection. Until that changed. They called themselves the Brand. The outside world would come to know them as the Aryan Brotherhood, or simply, AB. At first, it was just a handful of men, mostly from San Quentin and Folsom Prison. They tattooed small shamrocks on their skin, 3 leaves, each representing a promise, loyalty, honor, blood. If you joined, you lived by their rules. If you betrayed them, you died by them. Within months, the Brotherhood started taking control of small corners of the prison, gambling, contraband, and eventually, narcotics. Their violence wasn't random. It was strategic. Every attack sent a message. Every killing built their legend. One officer later said, "You could always tell when the Brotherhood was about to move, the yard went quiet." By 1970, the Aryan Brotherhood had spread beyond California. Inmates transferred to other prisons, Leavenworth, Marion, and later, Florence ADX, carried the code with them. They brought the tattoos, the language, and the rules. The federal system began to take notice. Reports from wardens described the group as organized, militant, and capable of orchestrating hits inside multiple facilities. One report simply read, "This is no longer a gang. It's an organization." The turning point came in 1973. A black inmate named Robert Lee was stabbed to death in the showers at Folsom. The attack was swift, less than 20 seconds. Witnesses claimed the killers wore hand-drawn shamrocks on their arms. Investigators later tied the murder to the Aryan Brotherhood. It was retaliation, payback for an earlier assault on one of their members. But this time, it wasn't a single killing. It triggered a chain reaction that would engulf multiple prisons across California. Within days, fights erupted on the yard. Knives made from sharpened steel bars. Homemade shanks hidden in shoes. Fires lit in the laundry rooms. Guards scrambled to contain it, but the violence spread faster than they could respond. By the end of the month, 9 inmates were dead and more than 30 injured. Officials locked down Folsom for weeks. No yard time. No mail. No visits. But it didn't stop. Even from solitary confinement, the Brotherhood continued to operate. They used coded letters, legal mail, and even guards sympathetic to their cause to move information between facilities. The group's message was simple. If you hurt one of ours, we'll hurt 10 of yours. But the violence wasn't just racial anymore. It was business. Over time, the Brotherhood became a criminal empire inside prison walls. They ran drug trafficking rings, gambling operations, and extortion schemes, all under the noses of prison officials. Every dollar was taxed. Every deal approved. And at the top of it all sat a small commission, a council of leaders who ordered hits, approved members, and communicated with outside associates. By the late 1980s, the Aryan Brotherhood's influence reached beyond the prison walls. Their reach extended to biker gangs, drug traffickers, and organized crime networks on the outside. But what made them truly dangerous wasn't their size, it was their discipline. They didn't kill without purpose. They killed to control. One of the most chilling moments came in 1983 at the federal prison in Marion, Illinois, the most secure prison in America at the time. 2 correctional officers, Thomas Miller and Merle Klutz, were murdered on the same day by Brotherhood members. Both attacks were coordinated, minutes apart. It was the deadliest day for federal prison staff in modern U.S. history, and it forced the entire system to change. After that, Marion was placed on permanent lockdown, 23-hour isolation. That model would later inspire ADX Florence, the federal supermax prison designed for men exactly like those who led the Brotherhood. But locking them up didn't end it. It only made them stronger. Behind those concrete walls, the Brotherhood turned their cells into offices. From isolation, they sent orders through coded letters and visitors. Contracts were approved. Enemies were targeted. And murders continued, not just inside prison, but outside too. Federal investigators would later call it organized crime from solitary confinement. By the early 2000s, the FBI launched Operation White Thunder, a full-scale investigation into the Aryan Brotherhood structure, communication, and crimes. Hundreds of inmates were indicted on federal racketeering charges. Some faced the death penalty. But when agents finally questioned one of the high-ranking members, his reply was chilling. You can't kill what's already in the walls. What began as a group of white inmates banding together for protection had evolved into something far darker, a network built on loyalty, secrecy, and fear. And as one former FBI agent said, they turned survival into a business, and that business was death. But what happened next would shock even the toughest federal investigators, when the Brotherhood began turning on its own, silencing members who broke the code. Inside these walls, loyalty isn't forever. For the Aryan Brotherhood, betrayal came not from their enemies, but from within. And when it did, the result was one of the bloodiest internal wars in federal prison history. It started in the late 1990s, deep inside the federal penitentiary at Marion, Illinois. By then, the Brotherhood had grown into a vast network spanning dozens of prisons, state and federal, with connections to drug rings and criminal syndicates across the country. Their leaders, men like Barry Mills and Tyler Bingham, controlled operations from isolation units, giving orders through coded letters known as kites. But with power came greed and paranoia. The organization had always lived by one code: blood in, blood out. You joined by spilling blood. The only way out was death. But now, cracks began to form. It began with whispers that some high-ranking members were cooperating with federal agents. Rumors that snitches had begun feeding information about AB drug routes and murder-for-hire schemes to the FBI. No one wanted to believe it. Then came the proof. An intercepted letter, part of a sting operation by the Bureau of Prisons, revealed that a veteran AB enforcer had been leaking details of prison contracts and outside contacts in exchange for leniency. His name was David Chance. Within days, a kill order was issued. The Brotherhood didn't hold meetings or votes for such decisions. A single word from the top was enough: green light. That meant death, fast, silent, and final. Chance was serving his time in USP Florence, Colorado, not far from the new ADX Supermax. On a quiet morning, he walked the tier for his shower time. Within minutes, 2 men followed. Guards found him slumped in the corner, stabbed repeatedly with a sharpened piece of metal cut from a food tray. It was over before the alarms even went off. But killing Chance didn't end the paranoia. It fueled it. Soon, accusations began flying across prisons. Men suspected of being rats, of cooperating with investigators, of talking too much. The Brotherhood turned inward, and the purge began. The violence spread like a virus, reaching into prisons in California, Nevada, Texas, and the federal system. Members who once shared meals and codes now hunted each other down. One former guard recalled, "They used to look out for each other. But after '98, they stopped trusting anyone. Even the shamrock tattoo wasn't enough to save you." Inside Marion, 2 longtime members were found dead in their cells within weeks, one strangled, the other stabbed with a pen. Both had been accused of cooperating with authorities. But the real breaking point came in 2002. The FBI's Operation Black Thunder had been quietly building a case for years, using wiretaps, intercepted letters, and informants. They were closing in on Mills and Bingham, the Brotherhood's top leaders, accusing them of ordering murders from behind bars. What investigators didn't expect was that the Brotherhood's own paranoia would hand them the case. In one intercepted communication, members debated killing another leader who was suspected of being weak under pressure. That message, and others like it, became key evidence in one of the largest prison gang prosecutions in U.S. history. When the indictments finally dropped, 40 members of the Aryan Brotherhood were charged with racketeering, murder, and conspiracy, crimes that stretched across multiple states and decades. Federal prosecutors described the group as a terrorist organization within the prison system. In court, the Brotherhood's dark code was laid bare. Testimony revealed how they controlled drug trafficking networks worth millions, ordered hits through coded legal mail, and even taxed smaller prison gangs who wanted to operate on their turf. But the most shocking moments came from the witnesses themselves, former Brotherhood members who had turned against their own. One of them, a soft-spoken man named Michael Irish Quinn, took the stand wearing a bulletproof vest. He described in chilling detail how hits were arranged, how knives were smuggled in, and how even minor infractions, like failing to follow orders, could mean death. When asked why he finally decided to cooperate, Quinn looked at the prosecutor and said, "Because there's no Brotherhood left. It's just death." The trials dragged on for years. Some Brotherhood leaders received additional life sentences, others were sent to ADX Florence, placed under permanent lockdown, 1 man, 1 cell, 1 hour of freedom per day. But even then, investigators knew the gang wasn't gone. The Brotherhood had evolved. It no longer needed to meet in the yard or pass notes through vents. Instead, it used family members, girlfriends, and outside associates to keep operations alive. Letters disguised as poetry, coded phone calls, and even legal mail continued to carry orders from the inside out. One FBI agent put it bluntly, "You can lock the body up. But the mind? That's still free." By the mid-2000s, reports showed that the Aryan Brotherhood still controlled parts of the federal system, smaller, quieter, but more secretive. They focused on profit over ideology, money over message. The racist roots that once defined them had shifted into a more calculated form of organized crime. Still, the fear lingered. For inmates, guards, and investigators, the Brotherhood remained a ghost, invisible but present, a network without a face. The FBI's operations had fractured their empire, but it hadn't killed it. And deep in the solitary cells of Florence ADX, their leaders continued to write letters, sometimes to family, sometimes to lawyers, sometimes to others still loyal to the brand. One former agent described the group as a dying snake still ready to strike. The Brotherhood's legacy wasn't just measured in deaths or indictments. It was in the system it left behind, a model that other gangs would later imitate, small, decentralized, ruthless. And while many of its founders would die behind bars, new members were still being recruited in lower-level prisons. Men promised protection, power, and belonging. But soon, another war would test whether the Aryan Brotherhood could survive the next generation, a war not against their rivals, but against the changing world outside, increased surveillance, new prison intelligence systems, and their own fading code of silence. The real question was no longer how deadly they were, but how long they could hide in the shadows. Even locked inside the most secure prisons in America, the Brotherhood refused to disappear. If Chapter 1 was blood and power, and Chapter 2 was betrayal and collapse, this was their resurrection, digital, invisible, and smarter than ever. By the mid-2010s, federal intelligence officers began noticing a disturbing trend. While Aryan Brotherhood leaders like Barry Mills and Tyler Bingham were aging in solitary confinement, a new generation of inmates had begun adapting the group's code to a modern world, one run by smartphones, smuggled SIM cards, and encrypted messaging apps. No longer confined to handwritten kites, the new Brotherhood sent orders through text chains, voice memos, and VPN-shielded accounts. Messages disguised as love letters. Drug deals hidden inside Bible verses. Even artwork sent through prison email systems that, when decoded, revealed drop locations and payment instructions. Investigators at the Federal Bureau of Prisons called it a ghost network. They couldn't see it, but they could feel its presence, sudden spikes in violence, coordinated attacks across multiple prisons, and street-level drug shipments that matched prison schedules to the hour. At first, the FBI thought it was coincidence. Then came the evidence. That phrase, "the clover blooms again," was found in dozens of encrypted messages tied to known Brotherhood members. It was their new way of signaling active operations. For a group once defined by violence and tattoos, the digital age offered a new kind of power, invisibility. They no longer needed to draw blood in the yard to prove control. They could crash an investigation, redirect a shipment, or collect extortion payments with a few keystrokes. One former gang investigator described it like this: "We used to watch for hand signals. Now we monitor Wi-Fi signals." In 2017, the Bureau of Prisons launched a multi-agency task force called Operation Signal Silence, aimed at tracking and disabling contraband communication inside maximum security prisons. But the Aryan Brotherhood was always one step ahead. They adapted fast, switching from physical contraband phones to digital smuggling through corrupt staff and third-party vendors. Some associates on the outside were paid to pre-register burner devices under fake identities and have them shipped as disguised tools or medical equipment. Once inside, these phones were synced through Bluetooth mesh networks, creating short-range dark webs within the prison itself. A guard could walk the tier, and his detector would read nothing, but 3 cells away, encrypted texts were moving like wildfire. Through this new system, the Brotherhood didn't just communicate, they expanded. They recruited digitally, reaching out to state prisons and even jails where young white inmates sought protection or belonging. Every new recruit was a potential soldier, one former AB associate told investigators. But now they could find you before you even hit the yard. This digital outreach included fake profiles, online forums, and closed chat groups, all masked under innocuous usernames. Some operated from outside the country, sending funds and propaganda materials to inmates through cryptocurrency wallets and prison-approved kiosks. It wasn't just about violence anymore, it was about money. The modern Brotherhood learned to use encrypted money transfers, laundering cash through crypto exchanges and prepaid debit systems. One investigation in 2019 revealed over $4.5 million in transactions linked to prison accounts tied to the gang, traced through online gambling, tattoo shops, and trucking companies run by associates on the outside. The FBI's cyber division began tracking these patterns and realized something unsettling. Even when the leadership was completely isolated in supermax conditions, orders were still being executed with perfect timing. How? Through intermediaries, wives, girlfriends, lawyers, and clean associates who relayed coded messages under the guise of legal mail or privileged communication. In one instance, a lawyer's letter to a client at ADX Florence contained what looked like ordinary case notes. But every third word, when strung together, formed the phrase, "Approved contract for $12,000, Atlanta." It wasn't about legal defense. It was about a drug deal. Even as federal agents cracked down, the Brotherhood shifted tactics again. They began to exploit online prison email systems like Calllinks and JPay, systems meant for family contact. Using pre-arranged key phrases, they sent encrypted instructions hidden in casual exchanges. A message like "Tell Aunt June the garden's ready" could mean, "The drop is done. Payment cleared." The network had evolved into something beyond bars. It was now a hybrid empire, merging old-school violence with modern digital intelligence. By 2021, federal prosecutors called the Aryan Brotherhood the first fully digitized prison gang in U.S. history. Their leadership structure remained largely intact, Mills and Bingham still known as symbolic heads, but operations were fluid, decentralized, and hard to trace. For younger inmates, the digital version of the Brotherhood felt almost mythic, a ghostly authority that existed everywhere but nowhere. Orders came through phones, encrypted voice memos, or even QR codes hidden in smuggled photographs. One chilling example surfaced in 2022 when investigators found a single Polaroid mailed to a Florida inmate. It showed a scenic beach. But when scanned with forensic software, it revealed a steganographic message embedded in the pixels, an encrypted hit list. The Bureau of Prisons tried isolation, jamming, and mass transfers, but it only spread the network further. Each move created new offshoots, smaller cells adopting the same digital structure. From the outside, they began forming alliances with biker gangs and extremist groups, trading intel, weapons, and encrypted logistics. The Brotherhood had become what one FBI profiler called a digital cartel hiding in plain sight. Even the oldest members, once confined to paper and ink, learned to adapt. Mills, before his death in 2018, was rumored to have smuggled coded messages through religious scripture annotations, trusting younger members to transcribe them digitally. By the time of his passing, federal intelligence estimated that at least 70% of Aryan Brotherhood communication was happening online or through digital channels, either directly or via outside intermediaries. The Brotherhood had gone from steel to silicon, from ink to encryption. And though their numbers were smaller than ever, their reach had never been wider. When asked if the gang could ever truly be stopped, one retired federal investigator said quietly, "You can't stop an idea once it learns how to hide in data."